Chapter 9. Weirdlow? Never heard of it. Cynthia walks over and hands her helmet to Zephyr.
Long time no see,
She purrs as she walks by. Zephyr only growls again. Oh, this should be fun, Maxim says, turning to watch her leave, then exhaling loudly as Zephyr thrusts a spacesuit helmet into his midsection. Zephyr storms after the feline-featured criminal. What could go wrong? Will says, turning to follow the two women, patting Maxim on the arm as he passes him. Entering the lounge, Will finds Cynthia sliding her spacesuit off and handing it to Zephyr, who promptly tosses it onto the couch. Okay, so we're stuck with you. But there are ground rules, Cat Ninja Assistant Crime Boss Lady. Will levels a finger at Cynthia.
I'm Tigrin. Have you really never met another of my people?
She smirks and drops into a chair, where she drapes one leg over an arm, her tail swishing lazily. Will shakes his head once, then continues. You're a guest aboard this ship, so you can come and go as you like in the lounge and crew berth section. If you shed, you clean it up. Once we get where we're going, you're welcome on the bridge, but not before. Engineering and the cargo hold are off limits. He gestures to the kitchenette in one corner of the room. We tend to eat meals together. You can join or not.
Sounds fine to me. Anything else?
Yes, Zephyr answers.
How did you survive that firefight on Harith? Or get away from the authorities?
Or that crime boss, what's his name? Will adds.
Hoob.
Cynthia offers.
Yeah, him,
Zephyr says.
It might surprise you how far Xarrix and Lorath's reach goes, even on Harith. The Hoob character was a handful, I admit. I lost some good men fighting him and his goons off. When the Planetary Security Service showed up, he crawled back under whatever rock he came from before they secured the area. We sat in detention for a day, no big deal.
She shrugs, smiling.
Overall, it wasn't too bad.
She arches her back, stretching.
The bed wasn't very comfortable, though.
Just then, Bennie walks in from the crew berth area. Cynthia?
Hi, Pipsqueak.
She waves. Bennie gestures to the lounging woman. This is who we have to keep with us?
Afraid so,
Zephyr says, grabbing the discarded spacesuit and heading back toward the airlock and armory.
I'll grab her bag.
Great. Bennie gestures back toward the hatch he just came through. Your room is that way. Cynthia starts to get up before Will says, Not so fast. There's the little matter of payment, and then details. Xarrix said you'd have both. He gestures over to the terminal set into the bulkhead near the kitchenette. Cynthia reaches inside a pocket of her tight-fitting jumpsuit and retrieves a small device no more significant than her thumb. She tosses it to Will, who throws it to Bennie. Check it. Bennie nods and heads to the terminal. Okay, while he does that, details. What are we doing? Cynthia sits up in the chair and looks right at Will.
Holo projector?
Will gestures to a console set in the coffee table next to her. She retrieves another data stick and inserts it into a slot on the table console. The surface of the table comes to life, showing a section of the galaxy Will isn't familiar with. Just as Zephyr walks in with Maxim and takes a seat on the couch next to him.
This is just outside the Negru system,
Cynthia says. The image rotates and zooms to show several blue dots. Dozens, in fact.
These are our targets. They're all adrift in a relatively tight formation here.
She gestures to the dots.
This is 12 light years from Weirdlow 3, which is where our client is. Weirdlow?
Zephyr asks.
That system is classified as Badlands.
She looks at Will.
The Peacekeepers gave up trying to civilize the system and its neighbors several cycles ago. The last I heard, Weirdlow 3 was home to some low-writ warlord who'd taken control of the system. Be careful not to use that term if you meet our client.
Cynthia smiles.
She prefers the term Duchess, since warlord sounds so malevolent and masculine.
She chuckles.
And low rent sounds insulting. Warlord suits her just fine, as she's one of the cruelest beings I've ever met.
Cynthia shakes her head slightly,
I'm getting off track. These
and she gestures to the blue dots.
are some of the massive ships, freighters of some kind, we assume. She wants them to create a maritime fleet, to begin building her empire, so that she can expand beyond Werdlow. She sees shipping as the key.
You said she's a warlord. What's the need with empire building at this point? Will asked, leaning forward, staring at the hovering blue dots.
Werdlow is a relatively poor system, so are its neighbors. That's why it was so easy for the Peacekeepers to designate the region Badlands and be done.
Cynthia replies.
With a fleet of ships, she'll be able to create a shipping empire overnight.
So, evil space UPS? Got it, Will says. Off we go. Dropping from FTL in a few minutes, Will announced. He looks over at Cynthia, who is sitting at one of the unused bridge stations. You sure we'll be welcome? The feline-featured criminal nods slowly.
Xarrix and Lorath are already here. So are the other security contractor and the client. You'll be fine.
Maxim looks up from his console. Since we're almost there, why don't you tell us about this other group that Xarrix has hired? Cynthia smiles at the large ex-peacekeeper.
I don't know who they are. Xarrix hired them and never told me who it was. I don't even know if Lorath knew who they were before they arrived.
Sure are a lot of unknowns, Bennie says from his station.
Agreed.
Gabe says.
And that's why you're being paid so well.
The Tigran woman replies, then points to the main display.
Oh, look, we're here.
Will grumbles something underneath his breath, then focuses on the ship's controls. Reaching over, he pulls back the FTL slide, and the main screen changes from long, stretched-out rainbow lines to regular, everyday pinpricks of light.
I heard that, and wouldn't you like to know?
The Tigran chuckles, then turns to her station.
I'm contacting Xarrix and Lorath now.
The screen changes, and Xarrix is looking at the crew from the bridge of a ship Will doesn't recognize. He smiles. Kinda weird to not see you sitting in a booth at a bar. Xarrix laughs, which sounds like a rasping cough, then stops.
Always with the jokes. I wonder how funny you'd find it if I dropped a viral bomb on your mudball planet. I'm certain I could get in and out of your home star system without a peacekeeper patrol ever noticing.
His eyes narrow as he leans forward and stares directly at Will.
Would that be funny?
Will chokes on whatever he was about to say and just asks, Are we ready to go? Xarrix smirks.
Almost. Come aboard the Berserker. Duchess Jorella wants to meet the entire command staff for this little endeavor.
Maxim looks up from his station. Not a very apt name. He gestures to one of the smaller subscreens near the front of the bridge, which is showing a long-range view of what could at best be called a battleship-class vessel. Ancient and very under-maintained, but still enormous. Several of its gun emplacements are barren, and there are meters-wide patches across its hull. On the main screen, Xarrix clears his throat.
Just you. Your crew can remain aboard the Ghost.
No deal, man, Will says, but Xarrix interrupts.
It is non-negotiable. Cynthia, ensure he does as he's told.
The screen goes back to showing the section of space in front of the Ghost, which now includes the rapidly approaching battleship. Zephyr turns to Cynthia.
Excuse me, what? Ensure he does as he's told? And how exactly will you be doing that?
Her hand is resting on the pulse pistol she wears in a hip holster. Cynthia waves one hand.
Calm down, everyone.
She turns to Will.
Don't start this little outing on the wrong foot.
She gets up and leaves the bridge. I dislike her, Gabe offers. You and me both, buddy, Will says, working the controls bringing the Ghost closer to the Berserker. Zephyr, can you take the controls? I may have to go alone, but I don't have to go unprepared. He stands up and heads towards the bridge hatch. Gabe follows. As Will and Gabe enter the armory, below the bridge, Gabe says,
Captain, I do not have a good feeling about this. I would like to amend my earlier statement regarding my acceptance of this project.
No takebacks, pal, Will says, grabbing his modular armor. Probably be rude to show up in that Harith power armor of mine, he thinks, attaching the armored cuff around his wrist comm.
Is that a concept on your planet? Taking back things that have already been said?
Gabe asks, reaching up on a high shelf and grabbing a slim combat pack that Will can wear under his duster without it showing. Will takes the pack and slips it on. Thanks. No, well, sorta. The no takebacks thing is a phrase as old as Earth, I'm sure. It's just my people's way of accepting that what's in the past is past. You can't take back your approval any more than I could not set a course for the rendezvous point where we picked up Cynthia. Will shrugs. All we can do now is make the best of the situation as it evolves. He slides an armor plate onto his chest, the powerful magnets locking into the concealed attachment points in the underlayer he always wears under his everyday jumpsuit. Will grabs his brown leather duster and says, Okay, let's get this party started. Meet the team. As Will exits the armory, a metallic hand rests on his shoulder.
Take this,
Gabe offers, holding out a small device with a blinking blue light. It's no longer than Will's thumb and twice as wide. What is it? He asks, turning it over before shoving it in a shoulder pocket of his jumpsuit. There's a small thud against the hull, and Zephyr announces over the comms,
We're docked. They say we have to clear out to make room for the other ship.
A precaution, Gabe says, walking over and opening the inner doors of the airlock. Cynthia turns the corner.
Precaution?
Walking into the airlock, Will nods. Thanks, pal. Never you mind, he says to Cynthia. Will smiles at Gabe as the door closes on them both, then reaches over and presses the control to open the outer doors. The indicator shows a solid seal and atmosphere on the other side. The outer doors slide open to reveal a telescoping boarding tube connecting the Ghost to the Berserker. He looks over at Cynthia. Come on, pussycat. It takes only a moment for the two to drift from one ship to the other, the outer airlock doors opening as they arrive. Once inside the airlock, the exterior doors begin to close and the docking tube retracts. On the other side of the inner doors, Will can see Lorath waiting for them. Will glances over at Cynthia. Oh, look, your boss.
Welcome aboard the Berserker. The lounge is right this way,
Lorath says, turning and heading off down the corridor without looking to see if Will is following. Looking around himself, Will comments, So, Lorath, old pal, who's the other group Xarrix is hiring as security? The scales along the back of Lorath's neck shift, pink then purple, then a reddish color then back. She doesn't turn her head.
They're docking as soon as your ship vacates. You'll meet their captain soon enough.
Awesome. Surprises, Will says, as they enter the central lounge. As lounges go, it's somewhere better than the one on the Ghost, but not quite as opulent as the one on Bennie's parents' yacht. Will lets out a low whistle, taking in the scene. Xarrix is sitting near the back of the room, next to a raised dais with what might charitably be called a throne. On it sits a woman, judging by the sari-like outfit she's wearing. An elaborate headscarf is wrapped around the top of her head. Her skin is a jet black, with bright blue freckles. Her yellow pupilless eyes seem to take in the entire room. The rest of the room is filled by several long tables, with assorted alien species sitting at them, talking amongst themselves. Seeing Will enter, Xarrix motions to him.
Will Calder, come over here.
The reptilian gangster seems happier than he had been a little while ago. Lorath and Cynthia peel off from Will as he heads towards the throne, finding something to discuss that isn't near the female warlord.
Will Calder, captain of the Ghost. I have the pleasure of introducing you to the Duchess Jarella of the planet Worlo 3.
Xarrix says, pulling Will closer to the throne. Will bows slightly. It's a pleasure to meet you, Duchess. He looks up at her smiling face. The smile doesn't reach her eyes, and Will notices that each of her teeth seems to be filed to a point. It doesn't look natural. Lovely ship you have here, he gulps, trying to back away, but is stopped by Xarrix. Jarella eyes Will.
I like this one, though he seems rather puny and frail.
Her teeth make her words rasp slightly. Will notices that instead of a nose, she has two large slits that flex as she inhales. Will straightens. Whoa, whoa! Xarrix interrupts.
Will has worked with me before. He's an accomplished pilot and smuggler. I am sure you heard about the Xarrix incident. That was Captain Calder and his crew.
Jarilla nods.
I'm familiar with the exploits of the crew of the Ghost.
She claps her hands together.
Quite an exciting life you lead, young captain.
Will glances at Xarrix, then back to Jarilla. Thanks. Xarrix Kruthup! A voice booms from the opposite side of the room, from the corridor that leads to the airlock. As Will and Xarrix turn, Will hears Xarrix groan, then force a jovial tone.
Follex Soul, welcome.
Will turns to see what he can only describe as a leprechaun. Not the cereal box kind, but the horror movie kind. Oh, and it also has a mechanical leg and arm. The hell is that thing? Will asks under his breath. Xarrix murmurs.
Butoxin.
He walks towards the diminutive starship captain.
Follex Soul, it's been too long.
Xarrix places a fist across his chest. The butoxin reaches up and matches the gesture, his mechanical arm making small hissing noises as it moves. Indeed it has, you old scoundrel. I see you haven't driven old Lorath off. He turns and nods to the imposing henchwoman, who nods back. No idea why she stays with you. He smiles a gilded and jeweled smile. Any teeth not encrusted in jewels or covered in gold are yellow. Xarrix shrugs.
I pay well, and let her do as she likes. Come, meet our host.
Awkward dinner parties.
Now that everyone is here, introductions are in order.
Jarella announces, walking down the steps of her throne. She gestures to Xarrix.
Please, do the honors.
Xarrix nods and clears his throat. Will notices that the rest of the room must be hangers-on of Jarella's and ship's crew.
Yes, thank you, Duchess, our esteemed client and ruler of Werdlow III.
He gestures to Follex Soul.
Follex Soul and his crew have worked for me many times, doing some of the more unsavory work that is often required in my line of work. He's a consummate professional and will keep our salvage team safe. My number 2, Lorath, will work aboard his vessel as a liaison.
He nods to Follex Soul, who nods back, smiling widely.
Will Calder is a human,
Xarrix says. He pauses as Jarella and many others start to murmur.
His world is not a part of the GC. He and his crew are responsible for stopping the Peacekeepers from invading the Xarrix sector.
More murmuring and head nodding. Will is blushing.
You may have heard about the incident out near the edge of the GC at Barolo. That was them too. He and his crew are very dedicated and will make sure no harm comes to the salvagers.
He smiles his reptilian smile at Will.
They're excellent at not dying.
The introductions continue. Many around the table are in fact the salvage teams who will man the small tug freighters that will board the derelicts. They're a mismatch of races, including many Will has never encountered. After that, Jarella tells everyone to take a seat for a feast to mark the beginning of the endeavor that will transform her system into one the GC wants to interact with. Will ends up sitting across the table from Follex Soul and next to Lorath. He leans over to Xarrix second. So, you get to ride herd on the Munchkin and his crew? Was there like a paper, rock, scissors kind of thing? Winner gets the ghost? He smiles.
In fact, I chose to supervise Follex Soul, believe it or not. Babysitting you and your band of losers is the easy job.
She sneers as she pushes a scoop of something Will hasn't been able to identify around her plate with a piece of bread. She takes a bite, never letting her eyes off Will. When she finishes chewing, she adds,
His team is the one Xarrix hires for the jobs he doesn't think you can do.
"What's that mean?" Will asks, looking at something on his plate that is wriggling away from his fork. "What jobs does Xarrix have that I couldn't or wouldn't do? I've smuggled weapons and supplies, stolen merchandise." He looks at her without blinking. "Robbed super-secret space stations owned by the consortium?" Lorath looks Will in the eye, then begins to tick things off on her clawed fingers.
Transporting slaves, destroying food shipments for non-payment, hijacking, the occasional murder or assassination. Once he asked Follick's soul to deorbit a small orbital habitat.
Will is staring, his mouth hanging open.
You're going to attract flies like that,
She says, then turns to the grinning Follick's soul sitting across the table.
How have you been, Follick's?
The evil leprechaun pirate smiles his jewel-encrusted smile at her.
Quite well. We recently came to run a small piracy operation near Bintux.
Oh, Lorath says.
Killing the leader and his lieutenants helped to encourage the rest of the gang to fall in line behind me and mine. Very lucrative. I'm surprised Xarrix didn't tell you about it, as he's the one who provided the location of their base and some special weapons for the task.
He glances at Will, who is listening, while trying to make it look like his food has been eaten without actually taking a bite.
Apparently, they were behind on payments for some rather nasty weapons Xarrix had sold them.
Harsh, Will mutters. Follick's soul looks from Lorath to Will.
What about you, Will Calder? You seem a bit honorable to be amongst this group. What with saving the galaxy and all. How'd you end up working with Xarrix?
Will smiles while chewing on something he can't identify, trying to think of a reply. To buy more time, he takes a sip of the grum in front of him. Well, it doesn't pay as well as you might think, saving the galaxy, though the Ghost got a complete overhaul from the Incarans, all on the Harith's dime, so that was nice. I've been working with Xarrix since I got the Ghost, actually. He hooked me up with work and even helped me find my crew. Backstabbing crime boss notwithstanding, he's done me some solids. Will shrugs. This job sounded interesting. Follick's grins.
That's right. You came aboard in that Ankaran Raptor. Very nice ship for an older model, that is.
Will glowers, turning to look the diminutive pirate in the eye. Excuse me? The Patoxian pirate spread his hands wide.
The Ankaran Raptor Model 89 was a great ship in its time. I know many a pirate who tried to get their hands on one when they came out. Alas, as usual, the Peacekeepers kept most of them for themselves.
He grins.
The Model 92. Now that's a fighting machine.
I'll have to see if I can find one and get a tour, Will says, taking a sip of his drink.
I'd be happy to show you around. My ship, the Butcher, is a Model 92.
Follick's smile, while enormous, is not at all friendly and doesn't reach his eyes. Will nearly chokes on his drink. You have a Raptor? I didn't think there were that many, outside Ankara or Peacekeeper Special Forces. He looks at Lorath, who just shrugs and turns to talk to a being that looks to Will like a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, only orange, its shell covered in spikes and with 3 eyes.
Oh yes, my friend, they are quite rare. I understand you stumbled onto yours. Quite impressive, that. I got the Butcher the old-fashioned way. I killed her captain and crew while they were aboard a space station getting drunk. Once her crew was dead and her own fate sealed, getting the command codes from the captain was easy. Her threshold for pain was surprisingly low.
Will stares down the little pirate. First of all, I didn't stumble onto the Ghost. She was given to me when her captain and crew, people I genuinely liked mostly, were murdered in cold blood by some Holgian assholes and a Peacekeeper scumbag named Janus II. Will pauses. Fuck you. He gets up and heads towards the back of the lounge. Looking over at Xarrix, he calls, Been fun. I'll be on my ship. Holler when we're ready to get underway. Without waiting for an answer, he exits the room, lifting his wrist comm to his mouth. Come get me.